it's not so much about the trail as it is about, kind of changing the mindset to include everyone and being inclusive and allowing for, these small changes that make huge differences in other people's lives.
Welcome to the Vermont Conversation. I'm David Goodman. In 2022, Allie Bianchi, a 23-year-old outdoorswoman and special educator from Richmond, broke her neck while mountain biking. She's now paralyzed below her chest. In 2025, Allie was rolling again, this time on a specially adapted mountain bike. Now she's the star of a new film. Best Day Ever follows the story of several adaptive mountain bikers, including Allie Bianchi, Greg Durso, and Ryan Manning, as they rediscover a sport they love. Central to their return to biking is the story of the world's first adaptive mountain bike trail network, which was built with the help of volunteers from Richmond Mountain Trails. The driving range, as it's known, opened in Bolton in 2024. Last week, the Vermont Land Trust signed an agreement with the Delorier family, the owners of Bolton Valley Ski Area, to conserve the land where the driving range is located. Richmond Mountain Trails and the Catamount Trail Association will hold recreation easements. Bern Brody, a veteran Vermont outdoor journalist who's also president of Richmond Mountain Trails, produced and co-directed Best Day Ever with filmmaker Ben Knight. The 48-minute film has been winning awards at film festivals around North America since its release last fall. The film and the trail project it chronicles show how a community can not only open the outdoors to people with disabilities, it can change culture. Here is the trailer from Best Day Ever.
It was New Year's Eve and I got a phone call at 5 in the morning. It's never good. And he knew. He said, I knew. I couldn't move, and I knew.
Imagine being an adult and they're taking away everything that you do independently and just zap. It is now gone and you have to rely on everybody else for everything. Like, no one's gonna sign up for that. Nobody would want that. It's a shitty feeling. It's crazy. You just feel like this burden. I think that's my biggest insecurity by far, is just having that feeling. I don't think it'll ever go away, but
that's the real trust fall, is when he trusts me and then I fall.
I think our inclination as able-bodied people is to feel bad for somebody who's had an injury, but when somebody doesn't feel bad for themselves, it changes your perspective.
The bicycle has always been known as a community builder. That sense of we're all doing this together transcends the bike itself.
Once you meet adaptive mountain bikers, you recognize that they are more aggressive, more skilled, more capable, more passionate. You realize, like, why do I have all these trails? And they don't.
When people think about adaptive trails, they think about very boring, smooth, green trails. And a lot of people even call them ADA trails, and that's not at all what we're trying to build.
He's changing the sport, you know. He's setting the example.
let me prove this to you. Like, let me show you, like, this can be done.
Drake made sure that his life was, for him, the best day ever.
I'm Bern Brody. I am a Richmond resident, and I am a freelance print journalist by trade. I'm president of Richmond Mountain Trails, and I am producer and co-director of Best Day Ever.
I'm Allie Bianchi, and I also am a Richmond resident. I am a special educator by trade and a community outdoors lover.
Ryan Manning. I live in South Burlington, and I'm a C6, C7 quadriplegic, and I am an avid outdoors recreator, and a father of two young girls.
Okay, well, let me start with Bern. I've known you for a long time as a print journalist, as many people around Vermont do. You have been really one of the best chroniclers of all things outdoors and otherwise. But I don't know you as a filmmaker. And talk about what inspired you to make this film and a film of any sort, since I think it's your first.
This is my first film. Who knows if it will be my last film? It might be. We'll see. So Richmond Mountain Trails in 2021 had the opportunity to build a new trail network on some lands along Route 2 in Bolton Flats. And just before that landowner reached out to us, and obviously in Vermont, so much recreation is on private land, and we, like all of us, depend so much on very generous landowners for our mountain bike rides and trail runs and dog walks and everything else. A landowner reached out to us, invited us to build trails on their lands, and I had just gone for a bike ride with Greg Durso, who is an adaptive cyclist, and saw that he couldn't ride his bike just like the rest of us could ride our bike because there weren't trails that could accommodate his bike. So when we got this opportunity from a landowner to build a brand new network, start from scratch on their land, I pitched my board, hey guys, like I told them the story, I just met Greg, and wouldn't it be cool if we built a network where really everyone could come and recreate? Like it didn't matter what kind of bike you're on, but if you had the skill and capability to ride the trails, you could come and ride the trails. And my board was unanimous in wanting to support that. And then we just kind of set out with shovels and tried to figure out how to make that happen. And there weren't really any instructions that we were able to turn to. There were some guidelines made for people with big budgets and big excavators and ski areas. And so we really had to kind of figure it out from the ground up. We did that with the help of an unbelievable crew of volunteers. I think during the course of the project, which started in 2021, and I think we're really just wrapping up our last build right now, we've had over 200 volunteers put in 6,000 hours of time. It was those volunteers that inspired me to make a movie and to step way outside of my comfort zone and my skill set, really. It was specifically the teenagers who came out to volunteer. And there were a lot of them who came out because they're excited, like to go build jumps or go like work on fresh berms or have a fresh place to ride. When those teenagers first came out, most of them, I don't think any of them that I know of had a relationship or had someone with a disability in their life. And so when those teenagers came out, I watched them not know how to interact with Greg, not know how to interact with other people with disabilities who are also there to ride bikes and also there to work on trails.
What do you mean not know how to interact? What was going on?
They just kind of didn't talk to Greg or, Louie or whoever was there. They just kind of like grabbed their shovel and went on their way. It was like they didn't quite know how to talk to this person. And within one trail night of digging together, riding bikes together, eating hot dogs together, hanging out together, like that dynamic totally changed. And that is specifically what made me feel like it's cool we have these trails in Vermont, but it would be a huge miss not to share this story more broadly and to try and inspire this in other places. Sorry, that was a long answer.
No, that's really helpful. And I will circle back with Allie and Ryan to that idea of people not knowing how to interact with you, because I kind of have the sense that you both have had this experience. But first, I want to ask Bern, this trail network that you've been part of building is described as the first adaptive mountain bike trail in the world, which really stunned me because, we know there are adaptive hiking trails, there are adaptive rail trails and biking. How is it that it has taken till, the 2020s till the mountain bike community signed on to this? And how surprised were you to learn that you were the first?
So I just want to clarify, these are not the first adaptive trails. This is the first fully adaptive trail network. And I can talk about why that's significant in a second. We are so fortunate in Vermont to have around 180 miles of adaptive trails in Vermont now. And that is exceptional in the United States. Like, I think it's safe to say we have more adaptive trails than anywhere else. Don't like I can't 100% say for sure, but I think that is the case. The reason it's important, and there are adaptive trails in Bentonville. There's adaptive trails at ski areas like at Jackson Hole. There's adaptive trails in the Southeast. I rode adaptive trail in Alabama and Louisiana and other places. We built the first fully adaptive network, which means that Allie, Ryan, Greg, whoever can go to that network with their friends and they can all ride the trails together if they have the skill to ride that level of trail, whether it's green or blue or black or double black or whatever it is. Two really important things for the Richmond Mountain Trails board when we dove into this project was, first of all, prove you can make adaptive trails of all difficulties, right? Because so many people think that an adaptive trail needs to be a paved sidewalk, or it has to be a green trail, or someone, is not someone who has a disability won't be able to ride it. But adaptive bikes are incredibly capable, and adaptive athletes are insanely capable. And so pair those two things together, and like you have athletes like Ryan and Allie who want to get out there. They want to progress. They want to learn this new sport of adaptive mountain biking and achieve levels in that sport that they've achieved in other sports in their lives. So that was one thing. We also really wanted to make sure that we just wanted to create a place where everybody could go out together, where everybody would have fun. So it's almost a misnomer to call the trails at the driving range, or really most of the trails in Vermont that are adaptive trails, maybe all of the trails, it's a misnomer almost to call them adaptive trails, because they're trails that are really fun for everybody, but they're trails that can accommodate an adaptive bike. And so Kelly, Allie, Ryan can ride just like anybody else. And that's what we set out to do.
So let me turn now to Allie and Ryan. And I wonder if each of you, and start with Allie, tell us about your accident and how it changed your life and what these trails mean to you. Allie, why don't you start?
Yeah, so when I got hurt, I was 23 and I happened to actually be mountain biking. And I had kind of just gotten really into it. However, I had always loved the outdoors, doing things from a young age, whether it be skiing, hiking, biking of some sort, really anything and all things. And so when I got hurt, it was kind of entering this world of like, I don't want to give up something that I love, and how can I still do those things that I love to do and that make me so happy, not only by myself, but involved and around all of the people that I love doing it with. And so being able to get back on a bike or being able to get back skiing, all of those things really allowed me to enter this next chapter of like, okay, we can still do this, and then having access to places like the driving range has made that much easier, because I'm not having to face the barriers of, oh, can my bike get through this trail, or can my bike, even get to the trail entrance, and all of these things that we face on a day-to-day, you don't have to think about when you have places like the driving range that are fully set up for it, which I think is super cool.
So, since people can't see your bike and you're describing how a trail can or can't handle your bike, explain why your bike is different and what the challenge of finding terrain where you actually fit.
Yeah, so when you often think about a mountain bike, there's two wheels, maybe the width of the bike without the handlebars is probably 4 inches, 5 inches, who knows? Add the handlebars on and that's another like foot or so. But then when you're talking about adaptive mountain bikes, you are not only having a handlebar, but you're having often two wheels in the front, and a wheel in the back, width-wise enough, so then that way there's also a seat that we can sit on, that allows us that our legs don't work to be able to get out on these trails, you know. And so when you're entering up onto a trailhead and there's a big boulder, or you know, sometimes they have rocks there or gates, so that way ATVs and different things can't get through. That also is stopping it, so our bikes aren't able to get through. Um, so really finding ways to make it so that not only can a two-wheeler able-bodied person be able to ride, but also us as adaptive athletes.
One of the things that struck me when I saw the movie was how small a change there might need to be to accommodate it. And we see at the very beginning of the movie, Greg Durso attempting to start on a trail, and immediately there's a tree. It's just too narrow to get through. And then encountering one wooden bridge after another. And for people who haven't been on a mountain bike trail, a modern mountain bike trail includes often a lot of wooden bridges. Um, and they maybe were 4 inches too narrow, not much. And had people thought of it, had this bridge been 6 inches wider, it could have worked for everybody. And Ryan, I wonder if you could, well, first I want to go back to that question to tell us about your accident, how it changed your life, and how these adaptive trails have changed your life.
Yeah, so I was 35 years old when I had my accident, and it kind of upended everything. I had both of my daughters pre-accident, so I was pretty active in the outdoors with them, biking and on the mountain, and so I really wanted to get back out there and go do this. So, mountain biking was big for me. My wife and I did it all the time, after work on the weekends, all summer long. So it was really, it was huge to get back out there. And so having the like, kind of similar to Allie mentioning is like, we face a lot of barriers going out and doing things. Is there a curb cut? Is there handicap parking? All of these things that we have to think through before we go and do something. But knowing that when we get to the trails, at the driving range, that all that stuff has been, someone's been there. It's been audited. We know that it goes, that we're going to be able to do that. So, elite, taking that whole stress factor and that anxiety out of things makes it just so much easier and so much more comfortable to go do. So, I think that's the biggest thing for me, having that and knowing that that's there and available. That's been awesome. So, um, yeah, that's kind of for me the biggest portion, the biggest part of that. So,
And it's not just purely the trails, it's the parking lot. There's
yeah,
parking. Ryan knows that he can get out of his van, and that the parking lot is suitable for his wheelchair so he can get to his bike, that he can transfer in the parking lot from his wheelchair to his bike, and that he can go on his way.
there's
And
a
there's
porta
that.
potty that you can get into.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah, all the things. Some people, Ryan, might wonder, why make a movie about a trail? When is a trail not just a trail?
I mean, that's a great question, and I don't know that the movie is really about the trail. Like, I think it's what started it, and it kind of really rolled into the community aspect of it, and the fact that, um, and Greg says it best in the movie is that there's, we just want to be out there and go do the things. Like I rode all of the Richmond Mountain Trails, on a two-wheel bike before my accident, and I just wanted to get back out there and do that again. I'm not a different person than what I was before my accident. I just have to ride a bike differently. So being able to do that and being able to go and do those things and ride those trails again has been awesome. So that like, going back to the question is like that it's not so much about the trail as it is about, kind of changing the mindset to include everyone and being inclusive and allowing for, these small changes that make huge differences in other people's lives. So,
Allie, and Bern mentioned that thing about how some of the young riders and trail crew builders at first didn't know how to interact with people with disability. What's your experience of that, and how has your experience in the outdoor community, and I understand it's beyond mountain biking, it's skiing as well. Talk about that a little.
Yeah, I think oftentimes people come up to you and uh Byrne says it in the film as well. They often will like feel bad, right? And it's hard to feel bad for somebody when they don't feel bad for themselves. And so I think when you go out into the community and people are not quite sure how exactly to interact or how to handle situations, and but the reality is they're no different than if I was an able body or my like before my injury, right? I'm the same person as I was before. So yeah, you can come up and give me like a hug, or you can talk and ask the same exact questions, and there's no difference in who I am because I'm in a wheelchair. And I think oftentimes kids learn in this other perception because they're constantly watching adults, right? They're doing and learning from adults and doing all of the same things. And so when they see adults feeling uncomfortable in a situation, it oftentimes then results in kids not knowing exactly how to handle it. And I think it's so cool to see how, kids in the driving range, or even like kids that I've been working with in the schools, when you spend time with someone with a disability, you learn that there is no difference. And they now will go out in the world and the rest of their life, they're not going to think twice when they see someone in a wheelchair or see someone with any type of really disability, right? They're just going to be like, oh, yeah, that's like so and so, and that's just how they do life. And it's just normalized. And I think we need more of that in this world.
There is a beautiful scene. I know you were a special educator in the Barry schools, and I don't. Are you? Have you returned to doing that? There's a scene of you returning to a classroom.
Yeah, so that was at a classroom in Williston, the elementary school there that I spend quite a bit of time at these days. And I have returned back to Barrie, but I've spent lots of times like in school. I often been in schools 4 days a week, I would say, 3, 4 days a week, doing all sorts of things and stuff, which has been super fun.
Hmm.
Um, and like I said, it's just so cool to see how kids at the driving range, how kids at school, like their perspective can shift when you spend time with
You
us.
you normalize it.
Yeah.
So, Allie, I want to ask you about. There's a real kind of emotional climax of the movie, and that is when you return to the site where you had your accident in, I think, 2022. First of all, I mean, the courage that it took to do that, you didn't have to do that. You're you and Ryan and Greg, your words and your actions speak very loudly. That was something kind of next level. What made you decide to return to the scene of the accident and talk about your emotions doing that, which is captured on film?
Yeah, I'm a very visual person and I like to have all the pieces to my puzzle answered. And so I remember everything that happened that day, and I just couldn't quite fully understand how I did so much to my dead neck and damaged it so badly just in a grass field going over that rock wall. I was like, I don't understand. And so being able to like, I knew that I wanted to go back. And as Bern and I were talking about earlier, like for my first ride ever really on my adaptive mountain bike, I was like, no, this is what we're doing. I don't care what anyone else says. Was because I just wanted to see it and get my eyes on it. And then once we were there, I was able to be like, oh yeah, there was a rock slab right where I flipped over the handlebar and landed on my neck. No wonder I shattered 2 vertebrae and did all these other things. And there's definitely like that piece of emotion, but I almost kind of just more was like, okay, cool, now I can understand, and like now I can keep moving on. And I think also to have the ability to get back to that spot and have access to it, I think is also super cool. Um, so yeah, it kind of just filled in that missing puzzle piece for me.
Well, you're sort of talking about filling in the intellectual question you had, like, how did this happen? But there was a huge emotional piece.
Yeah.
What was that part like?
Yeah, I think when it comes to the emotional side of it for me, I didn't really want that ride or mountain biking in general to be the thing that stops me from doing all of the things that I love, right? I didn't want to get hung up on that. And so I think at the end of the day, when it comes to getting hurt and going back to the spot and all of those things, I think it's kind of allowed me to be like, alrighty, like this is what's happened, but you're kind of continuing to conquer and do even greater and better things. And it hasn't really allowed like stopped you from doing that. And I think that that is really cool.
Hmm. Ryan, what do you want people to come away from this film knowing that they may not have known beforehand?
Um, I mean, I think, the biggest thing for me is, and we've kind of already touched on it and mentioned it a little bit, is that with so little effort and so much, we're already there building trails. And this can go for anything and anywhere, is that, you're already there building trails, you're doing the work. If you sit back and take a look at it through a little bit different lens, like maybe just a little bit more effort or a little bit more lift is just going to make things a lot easier and more accessible for a lot of other people. So, if anything, it's to kind of, you know, through mountain bike trail building, start to realize that you can look through that lens all over the place, in every aspect, and really understand that, maybe there's something that you're doing or that you could do, that really isn't going to change much, in the way that things happen. It's just a different way, but that's going to make a big difference for somebody else. So that I think is one of the biggest things that I would like people to take away from it. Um,
Mm.
so.
And if you're willing to care and if you're willing to put in the effort, then you might be lucky enough to have friends like Allie and Ryan to ride with.
And Bern, what are you hearing as a response within the trails community that you've been a part of and a leader of for a long time?
There's a huge interest in what we're doing in Vermont, not just at the driving range, but throughout Vermont. Like truly, Vermont is leading the way with adaptive assessments. Vermont Mountain Bike Association has been working with the Kelly Brush Foundation and Vermont Adaptive to look at existing trails and figure out where are those boulders that somebody rolled up in front of a trail network to keep an ATV out, but that prevent adaptive riders? Or where is that like one pinch point on a trail that makes it a trail where Ryan or Allie can't fit through? So there's an enormous amount going in Vermont, and really people are looking to us from all over. There's some really strong initiatives there's kind of like a few hubs throughout the country where there's a lot of adaptive trail building happening. But as I travel around, I just hear more and more interest in this. I'm really proud that in conjunction with Vermont Mountain Bike Association, I'm currently working on writing adaptive trail guidelines for adaptive trail building for International Mountain Bike Association, IMBA, and those guidelines are targeted to the BLM, but we definitely are working to have the information in there that will make them relevant everywhere. And again, it's a guideline, it's not a standard. It's a starting point that hopefully we can all agree on and then continue to build on and improve as we learn more and as we all just get better at this.
So, as people are listening and wondering where might they find an adaptive trails, adaptive trail network, and also how to do this, Bern, what are some resources? Where should they begin?
So, a fantastic resource for athletes is through the Kelly Brush Foundation. And Allie, it has a new name. It is called
The Adaptive Rec Hub.
The Adaptive Rec Hub. So you can link to that through the Best Day Ever website, which is bestdayever.mov. You can link to it through kellybrushfoundation.org. And that is a great resource for where to find trails, where to find adaptive recreation of all kinds, wherever you live. And it's a site that is designed for athletes, for their caregivers, for their families. It's just a great wealth of information. If you want to learn how to build adaptive trails, Richmond Mountain Trails, in conjunction with VIMBA, Kelly Brush Foundation, and Vermont Adaptive, made a series with Best Day Ever movie called How to Build Adaptive Trails. And you can find that free on YouTube. And that hopefully will give you a place to start. There will be guidelines coming from IMBA in early 2027. What did I miss? I'm sure there was more parts of that question.
Well, one of the things I know from having attended a screening of Best Day Ever is that you were trying to acquire the land that the driving range trail network is on. Say a little bit about that and how people can participate that.
Breaking news, we signed a purchase and sale agreement today with through Vermont Land Trust with the landowners. So we are raising money to both conserve and endow the property so that we can maintain the driving range trails in perpetuity in the excellent condition they are in, so it can continue to be a teaching and learning center for adaptive trail building. So people from all over the place will continue to come and ride the trails and experience what we built and also learn how to build them. If people would like to support that initiative, you can learn more at bestdayever.mov. There's a tab for the Driving Range Legacy project, and all donations are tax deductible. And we really appreciate your support and your interest.
Vern, what has surprised you? Stepping into this world, it strikes me that mid-career, you have just pivoted and opened a doorway into a world that perhaps you've really not had much interaction with at other times in your life.
I've had no interaction with movie making, but it's been incredibly fun. I've met amazing people, both through the trail building project, just so many incredible people, but also have made tons of friends getting to go to film festivals and just learning the business of movies. And again, this is a story that took me. It's not a story that I sought. So I can't tell you what the future holds, but it's just been such an honor and pleasure to be involved in sharing this particular story.
Allie, how has committing your story to film, how has that impacted you?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, and I'm sure Ryan could probably agree to this, by sharing our story and what's happened and living the world, and Greg could as well, like living the world with an SCI, especially as a quadriplegic, by sharing our story can help make a difference for everyone else around us, not only those with disabilities, but also just the general public. I don't know, why not? Like, the door is wide open. Come on in and ask some questions, I think it can just really share and make people more aware of just the world that we're living in and the realities of it, because I think oftentimes we are so focused in on our day-to-day and what we have going on that sometimes we forget to take a step back and look at the world from a little bit of a different perspective.
Well, that seems like a great note to wrap this up on. Ryan Manning, Allie Bianchi, and Vern Brody, I want to thank all of you for joining us on the Vermont Conversation and for sharing your stories in film as well in Best Day Ever.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Best Day Ever is the new documentary film following the story of adaptive mountain bikers in Vermont. It is directed by Vern Brody and Ben Knight and features, among others, Allie Bianchi and Ryan Manning. That does it for this week's Vermont Conversation. I'm David Goodman. Thanks so much for listening.